There you go. Okay, I can't hold anybody's hand. Hexa. You start. Oh, Andrea, you start. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yo ho wee, yo ho wee, yo wee, hey hi yo ho wee, ho wee, hey hi yo ho wee, ho wee, yo ho wee, yo ho wee, yo wee, hey hi yo ho wee, hey hi yo ho wee, ho wee, yo ho wee, yo ho wee, yo wee, hey hi yo ho wee, hey hi yo ho wee,
Tell us that was good.
It didn't.
I know.
Can I use your
It's
phone?
It's
Can I use your phone?
Can you eat great?
Phone, use your phone?
Where's that $100 bill?
I got $100 bill. I want to share a story with you folks because it's a very important part of our history. In 1989, I was at International Circumpolar Conference at Umeå University in northern Sweden. And from there I went to another conference in Amsterdam. And then on the way back, when I got to Chicago, I called the Haida to ask where the Lutas was. And they told me it was around Bella Bella, and if I hurry, they would have a seat for me on the canoe. So I made it to Masset. I flew in there and then to Sandspit. And then they said the canoe was at Grey Bay. So they took me to Grey Bay. And the next morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, we left Grey Bay. And we went out in the Hecate Straits. And it was really a strange feeling to be out there in the middle of the ocean and not see land, except for some mountain tops far to the west, which was Haida. And as we were traveling along, there's 12 paddlers, and Gary Russ was steering. And I heard this, I looked, and here porpoise were swimming alongside us. They weren't doing this, they were swimming on the surface, making that sound. They were coming alongside. And then they disappeared. And we were going, and all of a sudden Gary Russ said, "Whoa!" And there we all turned and looked, and dogfish were coming up behind the canoe, and hitting that steering paddle with their tail as they went by. This was the first time Haida had gone this route. 110 years were the first time. And so as we were going, I happened to look back, and the moon was coming up. It was late afternoon, and it had orange stripes on it. So we kept going, and it started to get dark, and our escort had dropped back, so we had no other boats out there. And we're heading toward Dead Tree. And as we got closer, we could see Big Fire on the beach, but we couldn't go too close because it was shallow and rocky. But as we got closer, we could hear people on the beach, they're singing. And then they got quiet. It must have been quite a sight from the people on the beach, because they could see that moon, and suddenly here comes this canoe paddling out of the moon. As we're coming in, I start singing a Tired Paddler song. And after another paddler picked it up and started singing. And as we got closer, I guess the people on the beach could hear us, because now we're in full voice. And Meter said the old days when they'd sing that song, they would start out quiet and then it would get stronger, then it would fade out as the canoe went by. So we turned, we couldn't go ashore, we turned and the moon was to our left. And all they could see was, the way we paddle our canoes is you don't stroke this way, you push this way. And so they could see all these arms going this way as we were paddling. And so as we turned to go back out to sea, people started to cry because we were disappearing back into the moon and our song was fading. We stopped singing and I could feel something looking at me. So I looked down, and there in the water right near the end of my paddle was a seal swimming on its side, looking at us. So I nodded to it like this, it nodded to me like this, and it was gone. So we went on out to Western Hunter, where we stayed for the night. And the next day they put a different crew on. So when they made the entry to Skidegate, they had chiefs, everybody on the beach. And we were taken ashore so we could be there too, to greet them when they came in. I think that was one of our finest hours. The first time in over 100 years, our canoes came in like that. And they carried us ashore. We carried the crew ashore, and people lifted that canoe, and they brought it up to the beach, and then people got off. They just spearburst and got off. But that's something I don't think I'll ever experience again, was that feeling of knowing that our ancestors were watching. And it still brings both a deep feeling of sadness and of gladness both. Sadness for what's happened to us, but sadness because Uncle Meter said, now we're traveling into light. Now we start finding the positive things that's going to make our lives good, instead of dragging all the other stuff along with us.
Angela said I could ride.
So when I had a stroke and I was in hospital, Uncle Meter came to see me, and he says, Canoe, used to be when we were badly injured or real sick, we didn't pray to be restored because we didn't know if that's what was meant to be. Instead, he said we'd call out, the Atlant Eo Kya Gong Gong, Shungs Hanwai. Big spirit in the atmosphere, my spirit calls, come and take a look, see what I need. Then you leave it at that, and that's what I did. And everything works. But now we're traveling into light, so what was being talked about feelings here, it's easy to get dragged into that, but don't let it pull you down. You have to be what we call kasa. You have to walk above, and don't let those things pull you down. And I'm just so proud of you young people and the things you're doing. I dreamed of having a long house in Heidelberg. I went and found a place and measured it out, but it wasn't time. And then when I found out that the house was built in Heidelberg, I thought, okay, the boardwalks are gone now. Now we're back to our house. And that's how I feel about it. But thank you.
Oh. Itlaten Flintkinsen, den als killa ojaken. Gassen, das galas. Den gassen das aus. About the little boy. Yeah.
Ning ilinga iskele git. Gin le tana wayan. Gin tana was glue. Ning ilingas atided. Against al had against al the king was lu. Didang was sudayan. Nga atided dut eten. Adi had the boat,
What?
the canoe.
Oh, Chloe.
Had Chloe as had hukone la sudas kenu. Hingan les ehi dan. Gum la hat le sudas gum ail ansun. As kenu had Chloe a dan. We're going gwil cadli slu. Sitgang king slu le git. Ehi odi do dig. Dingal di is go down. We're going to hat le sudayan. Who dingal suda gigan. Gum sitgang eat sang. Dow dimas a king work and gum dingal clot langangang. We're going to lust the whole kaida. I see lo eat arcade last lo gin eat kill is das lut and is the gini hook and gin et eat get sudas agnan. Dingson.
Who's goose keeping Howson goose waiting?
Dinguso ayas agnan dingal canning.
Oh, go sayo.
Dingal you can go quag it.
Come to long. Gooseland dingal suited. It too less nanning a suit summertime lang eating. Nanny skajus in the Latin cadang. Di darling nanny skajus in the cadayan. My older brothers. I'll do the man and jada and gooding a chujul eating. I'll choose a skinny gussies, little skajus in the cadawan. I'll do summertime gus of a slash get la nanny at eating. Chin one day il kugagan. Sakaya, I forget the name. Sagana. A jil kugagan, the tip ends, the manula howlaslagan. A jistogum hawan gogadung. Class geese can lug out gooding slugum, clag out college get tongue, nanning out gooding. The it nanur the man Galaga Kajugan. Come on, summertime gas the wild and dusk and come and lay wise and a chitlu deeper itling is dalgan. What was the name of that place? Anyway, it was behind the church. Church gate did go and is the guinea. Well, it was swamp water.
Yeah.
I'll do the Neil Guinea. Comes to, how one no comes to it good as gangan. Come coach get long scanners. It ging heen en ogen. Die nan Lord Pale op een slekeles, dat is die gesnangel strang. Als je zo die gij als het dan goed doen. Geen keilas. Het na nu de manuel kan goed doen asligen. Die had al eten. Die had toe kan goed doen asligen. Die had toe hades ging in agen wat. Die had land kan goed doen asligs. Wat een neel das. Als je gegentlist, als je zo hades genis dan. Als je zo twee Ierland lagen, hade atling is slow. Ierland laastligen. Is er nu nani eda?
It nan slay it I again is the gun.
Oh.
A seat like so.
It's laslo. It's like gwil genel is the gun wa.
Something on me.
Well, it's ne anna. Al tilu abesle nang titlo gasl nang. Outland suken dat so.
A what? A weekend new tanas le is the guinea at the out of Sudasam. The old nul howl the gun. A setu nugal the azi unless sele will what was nugal dinga guinea. What was
New scout.
new scout
New scout.
new scout azul galding guinea. We're gonna new the man ne angat kun as a see who azi kiu ne adula eats a see we're gonna Noel is das azi I azi le estas le tashrimuslu azi nuge nang arm
Yay.
le hies onsengo was neste ngal is de we're gonna hausen die au azi kiu ke I le tashrigen hausen nue nang christen we're gonna isken hausen is da azi kiu gel sang hida le hegen azi honest was genu die aule gitskich das genu le khatz azi le kits ailal is da hukonul ti gini we're le ti skenu azi
Taje.
Tadze al le kisu was le kun outlook nul du gini nul haldas a luti eat a lasting islu gum gin quiet gum gin
Hayden.
gum gusum gum gin sudanga the month a gun kingo was new king get on a hook on a eat sudigini.
Would be in the rocks under the.
Oh, Noel. It's no rock. Qua. Noel qua het go nangs a silu wazi kiu go islu go is an eat on sidini a silu un kinsu eat au gum gusuang Azi gadistasang kono ikal suslu kumtlum kusung kini hinganul lat ang kaya lang kini. Wag ano it is the sense kan ano dis ogal. Wag ano lat agum skin get lawas ogal kini. Demanu lat agant ang gu kwa kit as kini. I'm telling about my mother used to like to go, she really liked octopus. So she would take us along and we'd go and get octopus. And she had a stick that she used, it had a hook on the end. And she would stir the clam and cockle shells because the octopus really kept its house clean. And so it would pile the cockle shells, take it out of its house and pile it up. And my mother would take that stick and she'd move it around in the cockle shells. And we'd have to be really quiet because she said she wanted us to be quiet. Then the octopus, one arm would come out and then we'd wait a while. And then my mother would take and she would stir the cockle shells again. The second arm came out. Then when we took the cockle shell, when she stirred the cockle shell the third time when the octopus put the third arm out, she would grab the octopus and then she'd turn the head, put the head right into the stomach, and it killed it. And then she would take sand and she would clean the outside of the octopus before we got it home.
And were you scared?
Yeah, it's not like you were.
Yeah. I used to be scared. We all were scared, and she was really strong. We'd be terrified when she pulled it out because she did it really fast. She just yanked it out, and it was inside out. I don't know if anybody else ever did that, but we saw her doing
I
it.
used to watch Johnny Bennett do that. But when it come out, he'd reach in between the tentacles and grab it. But you had to be careful, that beak there will
Yeah.
bite you, cut your fingers off.
Yeah.
But he would pull it like that and it would turn inside out. And that's when he'd kill it.
Here, my mother stuck it into the stomach, stuck the head into the stomach.
Oh,
And
okay.
Yeah.
And she would clean it with sand.
Yeah.
I see people cutting it now, and I want to tell them, use sand when you kill it.
Yeah.
How did they do it with the sand? Just like a sandpaper almost?
Like sandpaper.
Yeah, you
yeah.
know, the sand will pull all the suckers off.
I did not know.
She was really strong, though. I tried it. I can't do it. I just
I'm really curious to know how to use it so I could try it, you know?
Yeah,
I don't know, I didn't learn that way.
yeah.
Is there a name for that octopus hunting stick?
Name for what?
That octopus hunting stick, does it have its own name?
Oh, yeah. Noose.
What do you call stick? What do you call stick?
No, skang? Skangway? Skangway?
Skangway.
Yeah, yes,
Skangway.
Skangway.
Noose
Noose
Skangway?
Skangway, yeah.
Yeah, we always had one, huh?
Yeah. Everybody had one in their home, but I never saw anyone do it like she did, ever. They just went in and pulled it out, and then they just would use a knife to kill it.
Yeah.
But she really had a method of doing it, and I don't know who she learned it from. It was fun to watch her do it, but scary too. Because we heard stories about octopus grabbing you and hanging onto the rock and drowning you. So that's why, because they would tell stories at night about octopus, and they would tell stories about giant octopus. And I was really surprised when my aunt, who was Tlingit, Roseanne Elmore, she told about giant octopus getting people at between Craig and Cloak. there was a giant octopus living there. And so, yeah, so we weren't the only ones that talked about octopus.
Was
Well-
there a giant rat too?
Oh, that's in Kasan, yeah.
Yeah.
There was a giant rat there and a giant octopus. And there was a giant eel. And the way those brothers killed that eel is they killed those wrens and took the intestines and dried them and made long string out of it and used a noose and they hung it over there that giant eel was. And one guy stayed outside and he kept taunting it till it stuck its head out. Then this guy pulled it up tight and tied it, and the eel was fighting to get away and it cut its own head off. But that was at Kasan. And Richard Dalton was telling me, he brought an octopus in one time. He had it in a bucket. It was late at night, big low tide, and he put it under the kitchen table and went to bed. And his wife got up. There was no lights at night that time. They had flashlight. So she went to the outhouse. And when she come back in, he woke up when he heard her screaming. He run out there. And what it was when she stepped through the door, her flashlight, that octopus was still alive and its eyes were shining from that bucket. He was looking at her. She thought monster got in her house. So there's lots of different kinds of stories about the war with the octopus. That happened at the Creek there in Canoe Pass. That's where these kids were playing with these baby octopus and they were taunting and abusing them. And so they decide they're going to get even with humans. But it's a story that Bob Kogo used to tell. So there's lots of those.
So we have about 10 minutes. Is there one more story that you'd folks like to tell before lunch?
Die kwai silkang ang le aitas de silkang is lagen. Ook is plu kwa ul silkang had la al itan. Asi plue kwa le khaslu azis neste. Smoke. Azi neste. Ayu is le kingslu. Ail dan le laksu gangan. Ning ning hala ayan gin hala aislu teman silkang le stilslu. Gum hangan is gumgul isn't alu. Na gekle nangan go oadwan tiayan. Asidlu le slu azi yang ne al le klukaslu azi cloud.
Yeah,
No, the cloud.
Yana?
the one,
The cloud.
cloud,
Yeah.
Krishna,
At Yana?
Yana.
Azi yanel kingslu. The man le goodinget du goyelan. At go cut skin. Ne kaslu. Nung jadau azi ogan. Asilu le goodinget du goyelan. Asilu di kwai hukon silkang kaslu. Azi le kingslu. The mano at le goodinget du goyelan. Kitan ailtayan go kit gut as kwanan lansungit again. Asilu azi ail kitan was hausen du goyelan. The mano lakla dan sul azi le kaslu ne wadwan le kingslu. I was telling about my brother fought in the Second World War. And when he was coming back to the village, he saw the houses and the smoke coming from the houses. And he said he remembered a story that one of the old people in our home told. He told about how he went out on a hunting trip. And when he was coming back, he saw that the enemy had destroyed his village. And his heart was broken, and he just was so saddened. And then he had been crying, and he looked up, and he saw smoke coming from one of those houses. And he said just seeing the smoke made his heart get so strong that he rode to that house. And when he got there, it was a woman. And he married that woman and had a big family after that. And so my brother said that story that he remembered strengthened his heart and made him start recovering from all the death he saw in Europe. So I really think of that story a lot when I feel sad. I hope I didn't take up everybody's time because I'm sorry.
That's what it was for.
Yeah, we'll have more time at 1 o'clock. In the Hickory room? Yeah. So we won't be able to utilize this room after lunch. We'll have to go to the Hickory room, which is right next door. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
He's buying us lunch.
That's what you heard, huh?
Yeah.
It's lunchtime.
We done guitars. We done guitars. Oh yeah.